So by the time Bananas came out, Woody Allen was seen as a bankable box office star, given $2 or $3 million, and a late night drive-in or late night showing become a hit. He's a very literate guy, and for his next movie, he decided to go with a sex comedy anthology film he directed himself. Considered an instant classic, it's a series of short sequences loosely inspired by David Rubin's 69 book of the same name. One of the longest titles of all time, everything you always want to know about sex, but were afraid to ask. The film was an early success for Woody Allen, with 18 million in North American rentals alone against a $2 million budget, making it the top 10 box office hit of 1972, and that's saying a lot because he had Godfather. Now, the credits that start and close the film are played over a backdrop of large mass of white rabbits to the tune of Let's Misbehave by Cole Porter. Produced by Charles Jaffe, directed, written, and starring Woody Allen, with the great John Carradine as a very, very, hungry character. Lou Jacoby, his ex-wife Louise Lasser, Anthony Quayle, Tony Randall, Lynn Redgrave, Burt Reynolds, and Gina Wilder. Is that a sheep? Yes, it's a sheep. David M. Walsh cinematography, music by Mundell Lowe. Production companies included Charles A. Jaffe, Jack Rowlands, Brodsky Gould. They're distributed by UA. Only 88 minutes, but there were some sequences that were cut out, so there's a longer cut. Some of the language was in Italian, with again $2 million budget. Now, there's 7 different sub chapters. Number 1, do aphrodisiacs work? A court jester gives a love potion to the queen, but is foiled by her chastity belt. There are references to Shakespeare's Hamlet throughout, and that's with Lynn Redgrave. What is sodomy? Dr. Ross falls in love with the partner of an American patient, a sheep. Why do some women have trouble reaching an orgasm? Allen's homage to Italian filmmaking in general and Casanova 70, Michelangelo Antonioni and Federico Fellini in particular, about Gina, a woman who can only reach orgasm in public, and most of the scene is in Italian. Our transvestite homosexuals, Sam Musgrave, played by Luca Shokobi, a middle-aged married man experiments with women's clothing. Number 5, what are sex perverts? A parody of the television game show What's My Line, called What's My Perversion, filmed in black and white kinescope style, and hosted by Jack Berry. The 4 panelists who attempt to guess the contestant's perversion are, of all people, Regis Philbin, Robert Q. Lewis, Pamela Mason, and Tony Holt. After they fail to guess the contestant's perversion, is likes to expose himself on subways. The second segment of the show is presented, in which a selected viewer, in this case a rabbi, gets to act out his bondage, humiliating fantasy. What? He's 5 feet pork. So food and sex work together. Now, are the findings of doctors and clinics who do sexual research and experiments accurate? Victor, a sex researcher, and Helen Lacey, a journalist, visited Dr. Bernardo, a researcher who formerly worked with Masters and Johnson, but now his own laboratory complete with a lab assistant named Igor. After he sees a series of bizarre sexual experiments underway at the lab and realized that Bernardo was insane, they escape before Helen becomes the subject of another of his experiments. The segment culminates with a scene in which the countryside is terrorized by a giant runaway breast created by the researcher. Not sure if Playboy was a sponsor of this. The first part of the segment is a parody of Ed Wood's Bride of the Monster, and especially The Unearthly from 1957, which also stars John Carradine. The second part parodies many of giant monster movies on the 1950s. All I can say, ladies and gentlemen, the villain was anatomically correct. Yeah. What happens during ejaculation? The NASA-like mission control centers a man's brain is seen as he gets involved in a sexual clinch with an NYU graduate. Knowledge that she's a graduate at NYU assures coital success. Burt Reynolds and all the different sperms are getting ready, but Allen, as a sperm, says, what happens if it's an anal encounter? That's a line. As he achieves orgasm, the soldier-like white uniformed sperm are dispatched paratrooper style into the great unknown. So again, Jack Berry again plays himself, Pamela Mason as herself, Regis Philbin as himself, Oscar Berge as brain control, and Robin Walden as sperm. He plays from Lou Grant fame. So the soundtrack, Let's Misbehave by Cole Porter, Battle Hymn of the Republic, and Red River Valley. Played on Monica by Woody Allen of all people. On Rotten Tomatoes, 88% of 26 critics are positive, with an average rating of 7.3 out of 10. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 66 out of 100, based on 5 critics, including indicating generally favorable reviews. Now, this was shown back-to-back with some venues with bananas, and some venues showed this and then bananas. Now, in an August 72 review by Time, said the film's ideas sound good on paper, but that the skits wind down rather than take off from the ideas. The film includes some broad, funny send-ups of other movies, Fantastic Voyage, Le Noté, and its fair share of memorably wacky lines, but overall, it's just Woody making time and being merely a little funnier. Now, Christopher Null at filmcritic.com called it a minor classic in Woody Allen's most absurd film ever. This was before Sleeper, of course. Now, the film was banned in Ireland on March 20, 1973. A cut version was passed in 1979 and released theatrically in 1980, removing both a bestiality reference, the greatest lay I ever had, referring to a sheep, and a man having sex with a loaf of rye bread. The ban on the uncut version was eventually lifted. So they weren't worried about the naked breasts, and they weren't worried about the chastity belt, but they're worried about rye sex and sheep sex. Now, 1972 was a really good year for movies, and to my knowledge, like I said, there was no talk of this getting a screenplay or even cinematography nomination. Like the way it's put together, you look at Kentucky Fried Movie later on in the airplane. This owes a lot to that type of style. When I first watched this movie, it was in French. I didn't get it. Don't ask me why they were showing this movie in French. But Woody Allen at this time was your typical Marxist comic. He was doing something like Groucho Marx, but turned the Groucho Marx meter up a little bit, more sexual. Why would he choose Lynn Redgrave? Redgrave, very nice looking lady, but couldn't he have chosen one of the Hitchcock women, like Tippi Hedren would have been perfect. But the idea, ladies and gentlemen, the funniest part for me, when the rabbi's watching his wife eat pork. I don't know how many takes that took, but it's kind of freaky. But Regis Philbin at the time, he wasn't Regis Philbin yet. But Woody Allen would always have some guest celebrities in. Of course, you had Don Dumphy and Howard Cosell, the classic appearances in Bananas about, the overturn of the Banana Republic. But to see the Regis Philbin in this, compared to what he was doing 17 years later or 15 years later, is pretty freaky. So everything you want to know is sex, but are afraid to ask. Again, the only negative is Louise Lasser. Don't like her as a comedian, never liked her as an actress. I think Woody maybe was take pity on her, maybe to help pay her medical bills. You can imagine Bananas, this, and Sleeper back to back. Boys, it was hitting out in the park. So we're going to do something on Sleeper. This is our Woody Allen remote control and screenshots combination. I'd like to see like a TV version of this in the modern era, starring a whole bunch of key actors. By the way, Woody Allen did very little TV besides stand-up. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing, we're a Woody Allen podcast. Let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.